some advice to deal makers on how you get to yes and how you can influence and what you've learned during that, I'd say, subtle negotiating, because you have to bring influence to the most powerful people in the world.
Well, I mean, that is the role of the chairman. I mean, you're whatever power you have is the power of influence, power of persuasion sort of thing. And you always have to keep in mind that the president or the Secretary of Defense, that's the chain of command, not you, right? And you're not the elected official. The president's the elected official. So it's important that you adapt to the decision maker, not the decision maker adapt to you.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SBJ's On Stage. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom. This week, we're bringing you a memorable conversation from SBJ's Dealmakers conference in Washington, D.C., recorded on October 30th, 2024. It's a conversation that deserves to remain top of mind and features General Mark Milley, the recently retired chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Ted Leonsis, the founder and CEO of Monumental Sports and Entertainment. On paper, they come from very different worlds: military leadership and sports ownership. But what unfolds in this fireside chat is a deeply thoughtful conversation about shared responsibility, the nature of leadership, and how institutions, from the Pentagon to pro sports teams, can evolve without losing their values. It's strategic, it's philosophical, and it's a reminder that leadership isn't about title. It's about service and purpose. Let's go on stage.
On the way down, I did a little bit of research. I was going down Connecticut Avenue, and it was designed by the French. Washington, D.C. was designed by the French. And there was a either fictional or real soldier, Nicolas Chauvin. And he was wounded 17 times, disfigured terribly. And all he did was extol the virtues of his country and nationalism. Now, obviously, chauvinism has gotten a bad name, but it really was rooted in love of country and love of service to a higher power. And last night, Washington, D.C., it shone. We had a presidential candidate speak in front of 75,000 people. Caps were on ESPN, beat the Rangers, 20,000 people, total sellout. We had the race in heels, 2,000 people, showing our diversity, and we had 2 people arrested. Only Washington, D.C. can manage big events like that. And Washington, D.C. is the most important place on earth. And it's why we can have people like General Milley here. And this is called Dealmakers. Elon Musk has been in the news a lot. Elon Musk's fortune, all based here. Obama doesn't do his work for electric cars and tax rebates. NASA Senator Bill Nelson, who's my congressman in Florida, doesn't award all of the work for SpaceX. He's not the richest man in the world. Jeff Bezos has been in the news a lot. He bought the Washington Post. He put Amazon headquarters 2 in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia. The smartest people in the PE world, Josh Harris. He bought the Washington Commanders, first in the East. David Rubenstein, he's a pretty smart guy, invented patriotic giving, founder of Carlyle. He just bought the Orioles. And last night, I gave everyone a tour as the highest paid docent in America for the Harry Benson gallery. I ask you all to go there. The world's most important people were photographed by Harry Benson, with all roads leading to Washington, D.C. So I'm a chauvinist for Washington, D.C. I'll remind everybody that the internet and all of the things that we'll be talking about over the next day in terms of media was founded here. DARPA created the internet. AOL was founded in Virginia. And media is no longer in New York City. I was chairman of the media committees for the NBA and the NHL. And when you look, Comcast, they're in Philadelphia. Amazon, they're in Seattle. YouTube is in the Valley. Microsoft is in Seattle. Meta's in the Valley. ESPN's Connecticut, and Sports Business Journal in Carolina. So I ask you all to understand that this is the smartest, most important place on the planet, and that people like General Milley really are some of the most important people in the world. And so I will go very quickly on General Milley, 20th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the number one highest ranking military officer. He also was chief of staff and ran the Army. He went to Princeton University, went with Eric Schmidt. And I read last night a paper that they wrote that really was a forerunner on what's happening in artificial intelligence and what the next generation of wars will be like and how America is not prepared. I recommend you all read it. The general played varsity hockey at Princeton, but is a true change agent. And that's what we're going to talk about. He really tried to change the business processes, how technology was spec'd, brought in, light architecture. We can learn so much from him on the volunteer army. How do you take millennials? How do you take Gen Z and get them up to speed in a technology-enabled army? He was all about fitness and health and mental health. He now teaches at Georgetown and Princeton, and he's an advisor and works at J.P. Morgan to Jamie Dimon. So, General, you know how much we respect you and love your ethos of service. And but what we're most interested in is tell us about sports and ice hockey and how that prepared you for your career in the military.
Well, thanks, Ted, and thanks to all of you guys for being here. I would make one comment, though, as a veteran of many firefights and lots of years in combat. If you're hanging around a guy who got wounded 17 times, it's probably best to join another squad. And, although I do respect Mr. Chauvin, that's great. And then, so Eric Schmidt, just for the record, he was in the half of the class that I wasn't in. So in case you're wondering about that, 2-0 and go sort of guy, hockey player, right? So, hey, look at, I think sports, I've always played sports all my life, and I think sports is fundamental to the development of our youth, but not just youth. I mean, beyond that, it teaches you so many things. Team sports are incredible because they're teaching you how to work with others. They're teaching you not only social skills and physical skills, but they're teaching you about cohesion, teamwork. There's no I in team, for example. Serving a cause bigger than yourself. It's not just about you, even if you're the star on the team. No one person takes a team to the Stanley Cup, right? No one person wins the World Series. It's a team effort, and everybody's got to complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. So I've always been a huge supporter of sports. Brother, father, sister, and my mom. Everybody played sports. My son is here, and he played lacrosse at Georgetown, and my daughter played lacrosse. So sports is a big deal, and I encourage everyone to get out there. Even if you're not a star, just get out there and play, and it teaches you so much.
The heavy caveat that there's obviously so much more at stake in active combat. We tend to, especially in the media, make sports and military share some of the same ideals. And so in your eyes, winning teams versus dysfunctional teams, tell me what you see.
Yeah. I mean, you're right that, we do a lot of sports metaphors in the military, and of course, in sports, there's a lot of military metaphors, and the costs and the risks are much different. And combat is life or death. I mean, you're not dealing with wins and losses and putting the puck in the net or putting the ball in the end zone sort of thing. But having said that, there is a lot of analogies. I mean, Churchill once famously said, I think it was Churchill who said, the wars of Britain are won on the fields of Eton sort of thing, right? So sports teaches you so much. It teaches you resilience and sort of stick-to-itness kind of thing. And when you get knocked down, you dust yourself off and get back up. It teaches you toughness. It teaches you not only how to win, but how to take a setback and then bounce back sort of thing. And there is a lot of that has to happen in the military as well. But the big thing about sports, especially team sports, is the sense of teamwork, the sense of serving something bigger than yourself. And it's not just me, I. It's we, it's us, it's the team. And I think that there's a direct correlation with that. If you look at some of our more elite units, for example, you'll find a very, very high proportion of college or at least high school, but a lot of times college and in some cases professional athletes are in some of our most elite units. And there's a reason for that. It's because they easily assimilate into the culture of working together as a team, and you're subsuming yourself, your individual personality, to a greater goal. It's not just about you. It's to a greater goal. It's the goal of winning as a team. So there is a lot that goes with it. I think that, in terms of sports, there are some sports that I think are more analogous than others. So, for example, football is oftentimes used, but football, in many ways, is set piece until you get audibles at the line of scrimmage. Sports that are more analogous to actual combat, on the ground combat, are things like lacrosse and hockey and soccer and basketball that are very dynamic. They're very interactive. They're not necessarily predictive, and it depends on a great deal of teamwork and knowing your teammate and which way they're going to go, and like Gretzky, anticipating where the puck's going to go as opposed to where it is, that kind of thing. So there are analogies, but you don't want to take it too far because the cost of war is human life, so it's much, much higher. But there are analogies that apply.
So, General, how many people reported up in you through all the services when you were head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
Yeah, so there's probably a little misconceptions about the chairman. Chairman's not a commander, so your direct reports are your staff, your immediate staff, the joint staff, and the chairman actually doesn't have any authority over the military. You're the top military guy, but your job is to advise the president. The president's commander-in-chief, and to advise the Secretary of Defense. And those are the two decision makers. There's only two people in the U.S. system who have decision authority over the entire U.S. military. That's the Secretary of Defense and the president. Vice president doesn't have it. Others don't have it. And it works through a chain of command. And what the chairman is an advisor to advise the president, Secretary of Defense, the members of the National Security Council on the readiness, the deployment, the employment of the military, and what the cost and risk factors are associated with that, and give recommendations and what are the advantages and disadvantages of those. And then presidents are not obligated to take your advice, but my experience, and I've worked closely with President Bush, with President Obama, and with President Trump and President Biden. They always listen. They don't just blow you off. They listen. But they're the decision maker. But in terms of the size of your military today is, roughly speaking, about 2.1 million across the board, across Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force. So across all of them, and that's active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. And they're deployed, obviously, a lot in the United States for training and readiness. But you've got about... I'm going to put the number at somewhere just south of maybe 200,000 or something like that deployed overseas. You've got about 100 ships out of more or less almost a 300-ship Navy, patrolling the seven seas to keep it open for commerce. You're running about 5,000 sorties of aircraft on an average day. And you've got troops deployed, like for right now, you've got troops in every country bordering Russia. So Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania. You don't have them in Ukraine. That's the only country that we don't have guys in. You got troops in the Middle East and Asia Pacific, et cetera. You got about 300,000 troops arrayed throughout the Pacific against China. So it's a big operation. It's a global operation, obviously, with I think we got about 500 or 600 bases in continental United States, and you got I don't know, maybe a couple hundred overseas, sort of thing. So it's a big operation. And these
What's the
troops
budget?
There. Budget's pretty big. The American people are very generous with the amount of money to support the defense budget. It's the most highly paid, well-resourced military in the world, with a budget of last year I think it was $840, and I think this year is coming in a little bit higher than that. So $8 billion. So it's a big operation. and it costs a lot of money. I mean, to buy and run aircraft carriers and F-35s and divisions of troops, et cetera. And what do you get for it? Well, you get the defense of America. So the whole purpose of it is to provide a common good to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to provide you, the American people, with so you can go to bed at night knowing that others are out there on the wall, so to speak, and protecting you. And that allows you to do your business, do your commerce, raise your kids, go to school, and live in some sense of safety.
That budget might be smaller than what is being dedicated around the world to building AI platforms. There was just a report that it could take $9 trillion to build out all of the infrastructure, all of the compute power, all of the energy that will be consumed. So do you think we're spending enough on defense?
Well, on defense, it's not just so much the total amount of money you spend on defense, it's where you spend it. So I would, one of the things when you do budgeting in the government, I would argue that a lot of people say, well, you don't ever get enough money. Okay, fine. But it's best to take a look at what you are spending your money on and prioritize that which gives you the best return on your investment to defend the American people. And I would argue that in today's world, we're in the middle of a major fundamental shift, a transformation. You're seeing it in the commercial sector with AI and quantum computing and robotics and things like that. Well, that's also happening in the military sector as well. And I think that we, the United States military, need to shift gears, not completely. You're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater sort of thing, but we need to shift gears and modify ourselves and transform ourselves into a military that is capable of operating in a future operating environment that's going to be dominated by drones and robots and artificial intelligence and so on. And we're not putting enough money in that, in my mind, right now. And that was part of the point of the article, was to try to spur discussion about that.
And human capital. We're basically in a volunteer army. I know you've spent a lot of time there. We all face that, recruiting, training, retaining. It's very hard now to get people mission-based. And so Tell me what you've been doing and what you've been advising now businesses on dealing with this new generation of worker.
So we went to a all-volunteer force shortly after Vietnam, and we've had that ever since. So I was commissioned 1980, so I spent 44 years in uniform, and the all-volunteer force comes in just a few years before I was commissioned. So my entire career in the military has been with an all-volunteer force. And the military, in order to sustain the skill levels, the talent, et cetera, we need to have a strong base of recruits. And the country provides those on a daily basis. We're bringing in a lot of people. So if you take a Fort Jackson, for example, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, if I remember my numbers right, I think that they bring in about, 60 to 80,000 recruits a year go through basic training at Fort Jackson. I mean, that's a lot of intake. That's huge. If you think about a Fort Hood, or I guess it's now Fort Cavazos, Texas, or Fort Bragg, which is now called Fort Liberty, those are huge bases. There's 50,000 troops at those bases. So in order to maintain that force structure, you got to bring in a significant amount of talent every single year. And these are young, obviously. And so you're not going to be looking at 40, 50, 60-year-olds. You're going to be looking at people between 18, 19 years old and say 25, something like that. And part of the challenge for us in the military is we have very strict standards to get in the military. So we've got all kinds of standards for psychological standards, for legal standards, physical standards, et cetera. And amazingly, only about, I think it's 23, 24% of America's youth meet those standards generally. And then of them, much less, I think it's something like 10 or 12%, have a predisposition to come in the military to begin with. So your actual youth pool is pretty small. Then you got to take a look at the type of talent you're bringing in. Excuse me. But so we're moving into this future change in warfare. So we're going to need much more talent that is much more attuned to things like artificial intelligence, computing, the digital age, that sort of thing. That's a different recruiting base than what we've been doing for, decades upon decades. So we've got to transform that as well. Recently, you've probably heard about a recruiting crisis, and there has been. There's a lot of contributing factors to that. But the good news is they're coming out of it. So the Army's reporting now that they're exceeding their recruiting goals, et cetera. So that's good. Marines, Navy, Air Force, similar. The fundamental cause for that, there were many causes, but the fundamental cause for that was COVID, because that shut our high schools down and our recruiters couldn't get in and do face-to-face recruiting and so on. Well, we're coming out of that. But what we really need to do is shift into identifying and recruiting the right talent for that future character of war that I'm talking about.
So we saw in the video, and I've noted to people, the military is probably the leader in diversity, promoting women, bringing a melting pot attitude for the new America. And so I thought that was very moving and important. And so what do you see on the go forward in being able to have a workforce and an Army, pilots, and to continue to build that kind of diversity?
Well, I mean, look, again, it goes back to team. You're looking for talent. You don't care about anybody's identification, their personal identification. I could care less whether someone's a male or female, black, white, Catholic, Protestant, gay. I don't actually give a shit. What I want them to do is put the puck in the net. I want them to have talent, right? So you want to pick the best talent. This is a big country, 350, north of 350. I think we're 380 now in terms of a million people. So you want to pick whomever is the best merit-based talent. Don't pick folks just because of some identifying factor, but also don't exclude them for that, right? So cast your net wide and get your net out there to pick the best talent for what you think. I'll give you an example. I'm originally from Boston, played hockey, so we did a recruiting trip up to Boston, which I thought was a good deal. Get to go home, and I was chief of staff of the Army. And so I go to a Bruins game, and I forget how many people were in the stadium, but some number of people were in the stadium and in the Boston Garden, and probably a couple thousand were of recruiting age, maybe. So I thought it was a good deal. I got out there, gave some remarks. It was a Veterans Weekend. We did some things for veterans, so I thought it was a really big deal. And then but the pool was a couple thousand, right? And of them, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred actually went over to a recruiting booth and talked to somebody. And then the recruiting battalion commander said to me, "Sir, we're going to take you to this other place. Now, it's going to be a little weird for you, given your age. I'm 66. Given your age, it's going to be a little strange. We're going to go over to the Boston Convention Center, and we're going to go in there and don't get shocked at what you see." And I said, "Okay, sure. I'm, open-minded guy, Boston, all that, right?" So we go over to the convention center, and I walk in. I'm in camouflage uniform. I got recruiters with me and stuff. We're walking around the convention center, and it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I mean, there's people, big, huge costumes and horns coming out of their head, and they got Viking uniforms on, and they got all kinds of bizarre things, purple hair, earrings, nose rings, all this kind of stuff, right? And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And this one kid comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you Call of Duty?" And I said, no. I said, "No, dude, I'm the real deal." So how many people were there? There were 30,000 people in that convention center, and almost all of them were recruiting age. And it was a gaming convention. So all these gamers from all over the country were there. I walked by one booth, and there's flames going all over the place. And there's 2 or 3 kids sitting up on the dais, and they're getting a $250,000 check. And I was like, "What's up with that?" And this guy who was dressed like a gorilla looks at me. He said, "They just won a game." I said, "They just got $250,000 for winning a game?" And he said, "Oh yeah, man, that's what we do." I'm like, I'm in the wrong business. So the recruiter was like, "Hey, sir, given the future, this is who we need. We need these guys. So get over your issue about purple hair and earrings, and look at these are patriot." I must have asked 100 or 200 kids, "Do you love America? And would you fight the Chinese?" "Oh yeah, we'll take the Chinese." And I'm like, okay, sign up.
Yes, we are quite aware. As you know, we were the 2-time NBA 2K champion. Our Team Liquid just won the Dota 2 championship. We'll all be getting rings again at Monumental. We came in second in the Worlds. In Saudi Arabia, got $4 million. Esports is Israel, 60 million people every month on a worldwide basis are playing games like League of Legends. And so that's very astute, and you shouldn't be afraid. That's the future.
I'll give you mentioned Israel. I'll give you another example real quick. I used to go to Israel quite a bit, and they have a unit. This would never happen in the American military. They have a unit that consists of nothing but autistic soldiers. And it was phenomenal. I can't tell you what they were doing. It was actually quite classified unit. It was unbelievable. And I was like, oh my God, look at this. They couldn't get into the American military. So my point is this. We, the military, the Pentagon, the country, Congress, et cetera, we just need to understand the future operating environment, the requirements that are going to be necessary to operate in that environment, and take a look at the specific attributes of the talent we need. So if you need a first baseman, you go out and get a first baseman. If you need computer scientists, go out and get a computer scientist. So we need to take a hard look at how we need to redesign and reform, not the entire military, but chunks of the military in order to meet the requirements of the future so that we prevail and remain the number one military power, number one economic power, so American people can stay, free and enjoy the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
So you've really done a great job with the mass, but you've also had to work with presidents and a lot of big personalities.
No way.
And so without getting particular and identifying folks, some advice to Dealmakers on how you get to yes and how you can influence and what you've learned during that, I'd say, subtle negotiating, because you have to bring influence to the most powerful people in the world.
Well, I mean, that is the role of the chairman. I mean, your whatever power you have is the power of influence, power of persuasion sort of thing. And you always have to keep in mind that the president or the Secretary of Defense, that's the chain of command, not you, right? And you're not the elected official. The president's the elected official. So it's important that you adapt to the decision maker, not the decision maker adapt to you. That's point one. But every president has, different personalities, right? And you have to understand what those personalities are and work within the bounds of those personalities. But you also have to maintain your own integrity. You have to maintain the integrity of your institution. And you have to maintain in our case, our oath of allegiance. So our oath of allegiance in the military, your military, we don't swear an oath to an individual. We swear an oath to an idea that's embodied in a document called the Constitution. Our oath is to the Constitution to protect and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And you can never forget that. And then you are obligated as a military to always follow lawful orders, but they have to be lawful. They got to be legal. And if the president were to ask you something or suggest something or tell you to do something that's illegal, or you think is illegal, or it's not correct, you have to have the moxie. You gotta have the intestinal fortitude. And these are powerful people to sit there and look the tiger in the eye and say, no, I think that's wrong. And here's why, A, B, C, D. And then they say, no, I want you to do A, B, C, D. And you say no, and it goes from there. So it's all very good. But at the end of the day, it's the power of persuasion. And one of the I think the 99.9% of the time, it works out fine, because most people don't want to wake up in the morning and do illegal things and stupid things. They want to do the right thing. So, but you do have to argue the case, and you're arguing the case with powerful people who have very strong personalities, and you've got to be at that table and not back down, sort of thing. You got to sit there and do it. Now, if you get an order, then and it's legal, then you execute it, even if you don't like it. And I've had plenty of those. But at the end of the day, you got to sit there in the breach, and every now and again, you got to drop the gloves. I mean, I got 100 stitches in my face and missing 4 teeth. So
we've talked about this over the years. What's the toughest part in your career and your job when you have to deal with?
Well, by far the toughest is loss of casualties. I've had 242 troops killed under my direct command, not including, Chief of Staff of the Army or chairman. which is a much broader group, but as a lower level commander, and some of them were killed as far away as you are from me right now. So that's far and away the darkest moments. And you never forget those. I keep a deck of cards with their faces and names at the house, and I've always done that, and try to stay in contact with families and stuff like that. I mean, look, that's gut wrenching hard. That doesn't. I mean, these are, for mothers and fathers, the natural order of things, right, is, the parents pass away before the child does, right? The loss of a child is just off the charts, and I've seen that way too many times. And and every commander who's ever commanded in combat knows that the place and time of the death of their soldier, that they, the commander, put them there. Now, they didn't kill him. The guy who killed him was the enemy, but you made the decisions as a commander to be there, to put them there, and you know that. Now, you're not guilty of their death, but you know that, and it weighs on you heavily. There's not a day go by that I don't see their faces or think about them and that sort of thing. So far and away, that's the toughest. Dealing with presidents and senators and congressmen and generals and foreign leaders pales in comparison to the level of difficulty. My dad hit the beach at Iwo Jima, 7,000 Marines dead in 19 days, 34,000 wounded. His uncle wounded at the Mizargan. I had cousins in Vietnam, uncles in Korea. Combat is a brutal, vicious thing, and it's very unforgiving, and it's horrific. And the reason we have a military is to prevent that from happening in the future, so that you, the American people, don't have to experience that kind of stuff. So 1% of those in this country, actually less than 1%, are putting the uniform on every day to make sure the 99% stay free. And
why we have to show gratitude all the time. Yeah. Let's end with a upbeat. When you retired 1 year ago.
I did.
Now in business, working for biggest bank, working for.
I was going to strap the skates on and go out there with Ovi.
You can do that too.
Help him get 38 goals this year.
Jamie Dimon, who's a big personality. I know the kind of services that you're providing there, but what are you positive of? What message can you leave with everyone here that says, we're going to be okay. Things are good.
Yeah. I mean, look at this. I know that next week we have an election. If you haven't figured that out, then probably shouldn't be in this room. But people talk about division, and there's the country's anxious. There's a lot of division, and that's all true, right? But look we are not at a point where we're the most divisive we've ever been. That would be the Civil War. We had very difficult times right after the Revolution, with rebellions and Shays' Rebellion, all that kind of stuff. We had some challenges in the late 1800s. Clearly, the early 1900s were really challenging. World War I, the first bombing of Wall Street right after that. If you look at the 1920s and 30s in the United States, you had the highest membership of the American Communist Party is during the Depression. And then the highest membership of the American Nazi Party is during that same period of time. You had I don't know how many thousands, but tens of thousands of people in wide varieties of extremist groups in the 20s and 30s. You had, I think it was, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40,000 members fully robed of the Ku Klux Klan marching down Constitution Ave in the 1920s or 30s or whatever. You can see it on YouTube. And they're fully dressed out, right? Think about the 1960s. I was born in 1958, so in 68, Bobby Kennedy is shot, Martin Luther King's shot. We've got race riots in all kinds of cities. 82nd Airborne Division was deployed here to Washington, D.C., and there was significant tension and dissension and division in our past. We are a strong country. We're a resilient country. We've got a good people. We've got a great workforce. We've got people from all kinds of backgrounds that still believe in the rule of law and e pluribus unum and the entire concept and the idea that is America. And this country will prevail. There's no doubt in my mind at all. I've been all over this country, back and forth, and have been dealing with America's youth for 4 decades. And they give me great hope. And this country gives me great hope because of who's in this country, the people of this country. This is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And it's going to stay that way. So no matter what happens next week, the country's going to wake up the next day, get back to work, dust yourself off, and get after it. And this always has been a great country, and it's going to continue to be a great country.
Perfect ending. Thank you. Thank you, General.
Thanks for listening to this episode of On Stage. If this conversation gave you new ways to think about leadership and service, subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with colleagues across sports, business, and beyond. Here's something to bring back to your organization. How are you helping your team stay grounded in values even as the game and the world continues to change? Send your reflections my way at tbloom@sportsbusinessjournal.com. We'll be back next week with another exclusive conversation from a leader shaping the future of sports business. Until then, stay tuned and stay ahead. This is On Stage.